Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Bob Dickinson and I'm a product specialist here at Hornbill, and I'll be taking you through today's session. And the content today is going to be looking at some of the advanced features within Hornbill Service Manager. Now if you have any questions after today's session, do head to our wiki, which is wiki.hornbill.com. We've got everything that we could talking about today documented, so do have a look and hopefully any questions you have can be answered there. But if they can't be, do head towards our Hornbill community forums, which are forums.hornbill.com. And not only will you have access to the entire team here at Hornbill, not just the product specialists themselves, but also the wider Hornbill community and other customers who are using this functionality may be able to assist you as well. So today's webinar is going to be split into four main areas. The first area I'm going to be talking about is sub-statuses, which is one of our new features here at Hornbill, but our customers have really taken to it, and it's worthwhile knowing it exists and potentially setting that up. The second area we're going to be looking at is going to be the Hornbill boards. Another way to view your data, and this is especially useful to look at the stages of your particular requests, so we'll be covering that second. Next we're going to be looking at some of the request actions that you might not be aware of, some useful features that we've got there which you may not have already clicked, so we're going to be just running through some of them. And finally we're going to be having a look at some of the Hornbill Service Manager settings. Now there's lots and lots of settings we've got available, but I just want to highlight some of the main ones that might be useful as part of your particular implementation. Okay, so to begin we're going to have a look at sub-statuses. Now, you might be familiar with standard statuses of requests. As you can see on the request list here, we've got a column, and they've got different statuses such as open, resolved, you might find on hold, closed, and so on. Now, in Hornbill, we also let you define sub-statuses, which are descriptive statuses that can be configured yourself. You can have as many as you like, and they can be set up against a parent status, so for example, open or on hold. Now, substatuses can be used simply for descriptive purposes, like we've got on our request list here, or even reporting. But there's also a lot of automation that can be tied into these to control, for example, how SLAs react and are affected by the substatus of a request. So for example, putting a request on and off of hold based on the substatus and the action that's been selected. So to give you an example of this, I'm going to open up one of our requests here. Let's have a look at this one. And when you have a look at this, what you'll notice is you've got this substatus drop down if substatuses have been set up on your system. So if I click on this, then you are presented with a number of different substatuses. The icons next to them actually indicate what's going to happen if you select this particular substatus. So the ones with the pause icon are going to put the request on hold. It's an on-hold substatus. And the ones with the play icon will put the request in an open state, so it will be active, which is what we call it in Hornbill. So for example, if I was awaiting customer feedback, let's click on this, we are presented with a pop-up and a date and time selector to choose when to put the request on hold until. You can put it on hold indefinitely. That's just a setting that we'll be coming on to in a moment. So I'm going to put this on hold for 2 days, and the reason being, I'm waiting for the customer to provide me logs. And once you've put that option in, if you click OK, what will happen is that will close. The request has now been put on hold, and you can see the substatus of this request is now awaiting customer feedback. If I was to go back onto our request list, you can see the request is on hold, but we can also actually show the substatus by just configuring our available columns and selecting the substatus option down here. Just drag that one up. And you will actually see there we've got this request, which is currently awaiting customer feedback. So another way of categorising and viewing the requests in a particular state. If I was to go back then when the customer provided me the log files and change the substatus once again to an active one, let's say back to in progress, let's put log files provided. This then puts the status back to open, and the substatus has now been set to in progress. The substatus that I showed you on the request list is also available on the portal to a customer who's monitoring this themselves, so they can actually have a look at the substatus as well. So to set up substatuses, you have two options. You have what we call the global substatus config, which will set up these substatuses across all of the requests, regardless of the service. But you can also have service-specific substatuses, so different options in that drop-down list that will only appear based on the service that that request has been raised against. So I'm going to start today by showing you how to create a global substatus. And to do this, we're going to navigate to the admin tool. And from the admin tool, this is contained within the Service Manager app under Configuration. And there's an option here called Request Substatuses. Now, as you can see already, we've already got a number of substatuses set up. These are the ones I was just using. The column that each of these substatuses is in indicates whether or not it's an active substatus, i.e. the one which had the play button next to it, or an on hold substatus, which was the one which had the pause button next to it. If it's on hold, any SLA timers that you've got will stop until it gets taken off hold. Now, it's very important to understand, if you do set up an on hold substatus, you must have at least one active substatus that it can be moved back into. So if you did actually provide, let's say, just awaiting customer feedback, but there wasn't any active substatus in this column, then the functionality would fail. So do bear that in mind when configuring this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new global on-hold substatus. I'm going to call this one Pending Engineer Visit. And I'm going to call this one Pending Engineer Visit. So to add this, click the Add button at the top and then give it a name. Now, the alternative customer label is what you would display to the customer on the portal. So perhaps if you wanted slightly different wording for your portal customers than you did for your analysts, you would put a different value here. So to demonstrate this, I might just put awaiting engineer visit. Now, the request type actually signifies, although it's global, you can still filter it down by the type of request. So do you want these substatuses to be just on one of these types of requests or on all of them? So I'm going to actually just put these ones available for all of my incidents. The payment status indicates whether it's an active or on hold status. And if you click on hold, you're actually presented with this option to specify whether you want to include a specific time or date to put it on hold until, or whether it will be on hold indefinitely. In this case, I do want to put on a specific time and date. Language, like everywhere else in Hornbill, you've got the different language options which you can set up to translate all of this, and then just ensure that the substatus is set to published. Click Create, and there we have our new on-hold substatus available. So if I just pop back to the request list now and open up one of these requests once again, if I select substatus, you can see there's my pending engineer visit, and if I selected it, it's an on hold offering me the date and time to select. Now for service-specific substatuses, we need to go into the service directly and you'll be able to see the substatus section. So I'm just going to do that now. So this is still in the user app, onto our services, and I'm going to pick out the tablets, iPad option that we've got. Now, when you click on request config and one of the different types that you've got against this service, down the bottom you can see your request substatuses, and as you can see the global service settings are there by default if you've got any of these set up. But you can actually add additional ones that will only be available for requests that are logged against this particular service. Exactly as before, you can create a substatus in an identical way by clicking the New Substatus button. And here I'm going to create another one which is going to be called Pending 24-hour in generation. So, let's say for example you needed to wait 24 hours for a particular tablet issue because of a pin that was being sent. We're going to set this up, and then you can see request type is already set to instant by default because that's the tab we're on. I'm going to set this up as an on hold substatus, and I do want to be able to select a date and time, just as before, publish and create. And as you can see, you actually get the service substatus here, which is not a global one, but it appears on the same service. Now, the little button that you can see that on each of these substatuses indicates whether or not the substatus can be automatically changed when a customer performs an action. So for example, we may want our awaiting customer feedback option to be changed when a customer responds via the portal, when the customer makes a comment on the portal because we're no longer awaiting the customer feedback. So it doesn't involve someone having to go in and manually be monitoring it and then taking it from one substatus to another. We can automatically change that. Now to do this, we need to first of all make it available to be changed. So this is a global substatus, so I'm just going to pop back to the admin tool. And you can see from here you've got these auto update options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the awaiting customer feedback one available to be auto updated. And I'm also going to make our in progress one from the active side available to be auto updated. Now if I pop back to the services page and just click refresh, what we should see when we scroll back down to the bottom is that these ones have actually been marked. You can't do it from the front end because these are global substatuses and the people who have access to the services are not necessarily the same ones who have access to the global substatuses. We then need to choose what to auto change the substatuses to when the requested customer does perform an action. And this is set here on these drop downs. So for example, we've got this on customer response changed to the substatus to, and so here we're going to be sort of thinking it's going to be on hold. If the customer responds, we want to change it to in progress. So let's see this in action by having our customer raise a request from the portal against our tablet service. So this is Steve R. He's logged into the portal and he's going to click on tablets and very quickly raise a tablets issue through the catalogue item. So that's something simple like my iPad's knocked me out. I've got a progressive capture that I set up specifically for this. Perhaps a few other details there. We click finish and that's now been logged. So back in our tablets iPad, if we look at requests, you can see this has actually been set and the substatus isn't set to anything. But what we can do is we can automatically set substatuses in business process as well. So whatever business process you've got set up against your particular service, you might have something to say every new request goes to an in progress substatus. We haven't got that here, but if we have a look at this from the analyst's perspective, so I'm just going to go to the request list. There's our new incident. What we might now do is just follow the business process. Perhaps let's assign an analyst to this. And what they may do is put this on hold with our awaiting customer feedback option. So I'm going to put here just something like asking for more details. Let's put how long has this lockout been for? Okay, so now when we click OK, that request has now been put on hold and with a status of awaiting customer feedback. And again, navigating back to the portal, if I refresh this page, we should see the substatus awaiting customer feedback. Now with our auto update, what I'd expect now is when I go back into this, the customer may see the update if you've made it visible. One other little option there is that you can set these defaults, but this is actually a team one. I'm just going to make this visible by clicking on customer there. So that should now be available. You can change that default, by the way. We'll be coming on to that a little bit later on. But what we may do as the customer, we might actually just reply with a comment. So I'm going to let's put 4 hours. Okay, so now he's put that update on. If we go back to the request, what you have now seen is that this has been updated. The substatus has changed from awaiting customer feedback to in progress following a customer update. The request has been taken off hold. The request has moved to in progress, so we've automatically done that. It hasn't needed that manual intervention. Now, I did that by putting a comment down, but other customer actions that would affect this would be if you posted something new, if you added an attachment, if you confirmed the resolution worked, or if you confirmed the resolution didn't work. One other thing is that these updates don't necessarily have to be made through the customer portal if you don't have a portal set up. Let's say a customer emailed in with an update, or you had some auto-routing rules to automatically apply an update to a request. One other thing that you can keep in mind is that back on the services form you can also control the automatic functionality or the automatic substatus of the request after it's come off hold. So just going back to this, you've also got an option here to say on auto off hold, change the substatus to, we might want to put that onto in progress as well. And what that means is if you have set a specified date for when a request should come off hold, a bit like I did earlier on, it will automatically change to in progress, again, to prevent that manual intervention. Okay, so that's substatuses. The next thing I'm going to do is be showing you boards. Now to do this, I'm just going to log out as system admin, and I'm going to log back in with Graham because he's got some full access to all of the boards that have been created. Okay, so let's log back in. Now, a board is another way of viewing your requests. It gives you kind of a top-down helicopter view of the progress of the requests or the stages that you define. Now, the easiest way of showing you this is giving you an example. So to access boards, it's under the menu on the left-hand side, under the Service Manager tile. If you've got the relevant permission and that's the relevant role, and that role is called My Boards, you'll have access to this boards option. And if we open it up, these are a few predefined boards. Now, if you're taking part in a switch on at the moment, you won't have any of these. It'll be empty. These have all been created for the purpose of my demo instance here. But if we pick one, let's say change management. Now, hopefully, when you look at this straight away, you can kind of realise what's going on. What we've got is a board which contains different lists, or some people call these swim lanes. And these lists can be defined with any title that you want. So we've actually got them kind of matching similarly to the stages of a change request here. So you've got an incoming stage, an assessed stage, the requests that are currently with CAB, the approved requests, the ones that are in progress. And if we just scroll to the right slightly, you've also got review there. So the reason why we might have a board is if I just duplicate this tab and go to the request list. When you're looking at a full list of any of these requests, as we're going to the changes, it doesn't tell you where you currently are in those particular requests. So if I was a member of the CAB and I wanted to have a quick look at all of the ones that are currently awaiting my authorization, I can't see that unless I go into each one individually. A board gives you the ability to display that from that kind of top-down perspective in regards to the stages that a particular request is currently at. Now, what boards can be used for, not just the type of stage. Now, what boards can be used for is not just in which stage a request is in. You can also use them for breaches to see how close a request is to breaching, or you could even use it to create your own view, like a RAG view, for example, red, amber, green, or if you had some particular complaints and some particular requests you wanted to keep an eye on, you can create your own board to and your own lists to manage that. But the beauty of doing one of these particular types of board is that you can actually build it into your business process to move along with the different stages of your request. So you never actually have to move these requests manually. You do have the ability to do that if you see how I can drag and drop one to the other. But where boards come into their own is when you actually get that automated. Okay, so to just show you how this might work, let's pick one of these requests that are already in here. So this one here is with the CAB. If I open this up, what we can see is the stages along the top, the checkpoints that have gone ahead, and you can see that the CAB is waiting to be approved there. And that's why we've got that. And if we actually have a look at the admin tool, so I'm just going to pop into that particular change business process. So this will be under the change process. When we have a closer look at this, what you can actually see is you've got these nodes which are add change to board or add to change board. They're under entity boards. You've got one which is add to board request, and you've also got some comments and remove from board if you want to. And when you select that, what you need to do is select the board name and the list, i.e. the blue column the column here in which that should be moved to. Now, even though it's called add request to board, even if you want to move that along, you still need to select that add request from board, because you can only have one request on one board at one point in time. So if I happen to look over here, when it gets to the planning stage, you can see that after the proposal, we've already got an automatic node here to move it along to the assessed column. And that will keep going until we get to the point we're at the moment. So if we have a look, you can see this particular request is awaiting the CAB authorization. And if we have a look at what's going to happen next back in that particular business process, you can see here we've got, once it's been approved, it's going to be marked as authorized and it's going to move on the board to approved. So let's do that. So I'm just going to come here. Let's just complete a few of these particular tasks. You can see the CAB's now been approved, and if we went and actually checked that particular request on our board, you can see it's moved from this column and it's gone through to our approved column. So it's a way of being able to do that. It's for your CAB, they can quickly have a look to see at the of the request they need to review. It's not just for CAB. If we go back and have a look at potentially a service request type process or procurement, you can see the requests that are in the different stages of procurement, whether it's being ordered, whether it's been approved, whether you're waiting for it to be delivered. You can have as many of these lists as you want, or even as many of your boards. So a request can be on multiple boards. It just can only be on one list in one board at a time. And you can even manually add requests to board. So if you're in a request here, you will notice this option here called board, and any boards that you have access to, you can manually add to this. So what I might do, if I was to create a new board here, I'm going to go back to my boards section. Let's click the create board option. I'm going to call this Graham's RAG. Click on create board. And then from here, you can then start adding your new lists. So we might have Amber as a new one, and we might have green. I'm just going to edit this first one to red. So there's my free lists, and if I go into any of those requests, I'm just going to pick one at random from another board. In fact, when you click on add to board, and there's Graham's RAG, and you can pick the particular column you want that to go in. So let's go to Amber. Back on the board, you can see that's there, and then Graham can actually move this around himself. He can move it from one list to another. Any changes you do make appear on a log here, so you can kind of see who's moved it manually and when. You can also start giving different access to boards. So if you don't want everyone to have visibility of this board, you can narrow it down by user or by a particular team, and also give them access here to modify. So if you do want to let other users manually be able to drag the requests from columns to columns on the particular board, you can allow them to do that by just turning that on. You can also change the order of the lists here, so if you want them in a different order, it's just drag and drop functionality, very simple. And the final thing I just want to show you on boards, I did mention it a little bit earlier on, but there is an option that you can actually use to have a breach board. And again, this is another way of automating it, but this is not done through the business process. This is if you have SLAs, service level agreements, and you have particular targets, typically a response and a resolution target. As soon as it's reaching different points in those particular targets, for example, as we've got here, breaching today, if it's going to breach in 2 hours, you can have what we call an escalation action, which will automatically move it between these different lists. And then finally, you might have a breach list, which is after that request is breached, it appears here. Now obviously, once the request has actually met its resolution, it will be removed from the board. But to be able to set these up, it's all done through service level management, so I suggest you have a look at the documentation that we've got around that, because I won't be covering that today. But if we go into services, service level agreements, I'll just see if I've got any which I can show you immediately. So we've got perhaps a major service level here with a resolution. These escalation events, so this is 30 minutes before it's going to breach. You can select actions, and then you've got an option here to add to board. So this is where you would then select your particular board, for example the breach board, and which list it should appear in. And then you can have different escalation actions at different times based on how close it is to breaching, and it can be automatically moving. So again, it's a really quick way of being able to quickly see some information that you wouldn't typically be able to get immediately from the request list. But do have a play around with boards. Boards is one of those areas where a lot of our customers now use them. A huge number see the benefit of it when they didn't actually realise they needed it in the first place. It's not something obvious, it's not a lot of something that our customers particularly ask us for, but when we start showing them how to build it and how to use it, it really becomes one of those features that they end up not being able to live without. So give it a go. That's boards, and that just comes with Service Manager, and you just need to add in the My Boards role to your profile to be able to use it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at are the different types of actions that you can perform on a request. Now, you may have already seen a few of these before. I'm just going to head to our request list. But what we're going to be looking at today are some of the ones which you may not have seen, and the functionality we've got available, and there's a few bits and pieces that you may choose to use if you want to. So I'm going to open up this incident here, 223. And when I'm referring to actions, what I'm actually talking about are these buttons that you have along the top. Now, if you've seen our services webinar, you may have remembered that you can actually hide these if you want. You don't have to be showing them. They are displayed on a service by service, type by type basis. So for example, if you didn't want this callback option on your desktop support requests, you can go into the service directly, click into request config, and you can simply choose to hide that by clicking on it and removing the enable on request option. If I just pop back to this request. But what I want to do is show you a few of these options just to let you know what a few more of them do and a few hidden away features that you may not have seen already. So the first one I want to show you is what we call connections. Now connections, which is this one here with the 3 different people, what it allows you to do is associate different users or customers to a particular request who aren't necessarily the customer themselves. So as you can see, we've got Alan Castle here, who's the customer. He's the person who's logged and reported this particular request. But what we can do is we can add in different people who have got a vested interest in this particular request. You can see over here we've got different types of connection type. So you've got impacted, interested, and on behalf on. In the system settings, you can actually edit this, so you can have your own ones, but these are the 3 that we give you out of the box. So, for example, for impacted, we might actually also put in, let's choose our old friend Steve Robinson, and add him as a connection here. And I'm also going to add interested, perhaps Rosemary, who is the change manager. So it can be either basic users or application users. So what you can actually end up with is a number of different connections, a number of people who have also got a link to this particular request. Now, when you add a connection, you can see that this grey bar appears and you've got the people that you've added and the type of connection that's been associated to them. So impacted and interested there. And you could have got the obvious filtering options if you've got many connections. Now, the purpose of this is not just to see who else is interested in this particular request or impacted by this particular request, but there are a few tricks you can use with this. So for example, if you need to get an email out to everyone who's associated to this request, i.e. all the connections, if we go on to the email from the request, you've got an option here to add connections into the people that you're sending this email to. So by default, it picks the customer, but we can also add perhaps all of our connections into the CC or the BCC part of this email, and you can see Steve and Rosemary automatically get added for me to go away and send my particular email to them. You've also got the ability there to do it just on the different types. So for example, if I just wanted to add in only the interested people into my email, I would just choose interested and then perhaps as a CC option. So that's one of the ways you can use connections. One of the other ways, again, you might have seen, if you've seen our services and portals webinar, it's all one webinar. If a customer is affected by a request on the portal, so if we have a look at, for example, the home working service, you can actually click on the known issues section and you can specify if you've been affected by this by clicking Me Too. I'm not going to go into this in detail on this webinar because it is covered elsewhere on our Services and Portals webinar, but if you click Me Too, that effectively will add this customer as a connection to an existing problem. So they'll be there and available to see who has been affected by that problem without them having to log an individual request each. So that's connections on the whole. It's useful for different purposes, but do use it if you do have that business need there. The next action I'm going to focus on is called Snippets. Now, those who've come from a SupportWorks background might be used to some similar functionality there, but a snippet is basically a reusable block of text that can be used within your emails, and it can also be shared between different users and different teams. So this is where you can add a snippet. At the moment it's only available in email, but we are going to be looking to add this in different areas of Hornbill. If you click on Snippets, what you can then do is click on here on Manage, and this allows you to create a new snippet. These are the snippets that you've currently created. If I click on Add New, I'm going to call this one Webinar Example, and in the content I'm going to put hello, this is a block of reusable text for incident. Kind regards. So straight away, without going into kind of the variables section at the moment, I can just save this. This is only available to me at the moment. Click on Snippets, click on myself, and there's my webinar example snippet, and it just puts in the text every single time, so it's consistent and I don't have to type it all out again. What I can then do, again, this isn't sent automatically, you can edit it before you send it, but if I go back into Manage the Snippets, I'm going to click back on Webinar Example, and now I'm going to put in a few variables. So a variable is something that's taken from the request that will change based on the content of that request. For example, I might put in the customer's first name, so hello, whatever the customer's first name is for this particular request. I'm then going to put in the reference of the request, and finally I might put in my name as the owner. Let's just format that slightly better, and click on Update. And now if I use the snippet, you can see that it's actually populated the name of the customer, the incident reference, and also the owner. Finally, on snippets, if you go to Manage and open up one of your snippets, you can see down here you can share it with different people. So you can make it available to a particular team. So I might make this available to the whole first line support team, click on Update, and that they then have got that same consistent text. So it's great if you are looking to have a bit of consistency between or based on the emails that are going out, especially when it comes to kind of login and resolving requests. When you have shared it with a team, when you click on Snippets, it will appear under Teams, and these are the ones that have been shared with all the teams that you are a member of. So that's Snippets, and that's, again, a nice little feature that can be used to save you guys a little bit of time. The next action, very quick one, we've got along the top here, is called Link Services. And again, you might choose here to link a particular service to a particular request, and this can also be done through business process. And again, very similar to connections, you've got the ability to have different types. We've just got one out of the box. We might say this incident is impacting the home working service and link that. And you can see down there, you get a linked service. And then what this does, again, if you've seen our asset management webinar, this will allow you to view the impact of particular incidents or particular services and what's impacting at the moment on our visual display. There's also some authorization functionality that we've got where you can base authorizers on the linked service. So this again is something that we won't be going into today, but it allows you to get a little bit more flexible with your authorizations, and when we talk about that, we're talking about the owner of that particular service. It could be an authorizer. So that's linked services. And the final action I'm going to show you is solutions. So over here, you've got the solution, this light bulb option. Now, there's two options you've got here, and this is very dependent on linking a problem to the request. So you can see here, we have got a linked problem. So if I go to linked requests, you can see this problem has been linked with this particular instance. And if you don't know how to do that, we've got a link option here. You can perform a search for requests. If I click VPN and enter, you can see that gives me anything that's got VPN. If I need to, I can actually perform some additional filtering using these drop downs. Or if you know what the reference is, for example, if I just copy this one, you can see it will just automatically bring up the one result. And then you just click on link, and that will link that particular request to this particular incident. You can even raise a new linked request directly from an incident, so that link will automatically occur after you've raised it. But going back to our solutions, if you've got a linked request and that problem or known error has a solution, so when we're talking about a solution, we're talking about a workaround that's been made available on that problem. We'll just pop back to the incident. What you can do is you can actually specify if that solution has actually worked. So if you review the solution on the option here on the Solutions tab, if that has worked, you can actually then say that wasn't the solution, or that was the solution. So I might say it's not. That highlights it, makes it grey, so we know that wasn't the case. But what you can also see is against this service, desktop support, we've also got a couple of FAQs that we've made available to our analysts as well. So on the FAQs, we can actually see some information here that has been set up against the service itself. So we've got open another person's Exchange calendar there. We can go through that and we can follow it and see if that was the solution. Once you've reviewed that, you might say that wasn't the solution as well. But we've got another one here which wasn't reviewed, and again, ignoring what the actual title of this particular incident is, but if I went through this one and I said, yeah, that actually worked for me, I can review it and accept the solution. And what that will do is it will copy the text from that solution, whether or not it's come from the linked problem or one of our FAQs, into the resolution. It's still editable, so you can actually go ahead and change any of this if you want to, but it saves a bit of time having to copy and paste or say, link back to a particular FAQ or solution. You can actually just come back here and actually resolve the request based on some additional information you've been given from something elsewhere. So that is, again, another quick hint and tip. And just for those people who haven't seen the service catalogue webinar, if we go to the service here, FAQs can be defined against the service as long as you've got the correct permission here. And you can create your own FAQs. You can see this one has only got the 2 FAQs. Or we can go into put in the text and the images and then embedded media if you need to as well. And you just simply make sure it's available to not just the portals, not just the service desk, but both. And that will allow you to do that through the user app. So that concludes some of the additional Service Manager actions. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour of what else is available in Service Manager, as you may have only kind of scratched the surface with the introductory webinar and what you've seen so far. But do ask your product specialists, or as I always mention, check our wiki and forums for any further information and how other people have been using this. The final thing we're going to be covering today is some of the application settings for Service Manager. Now, I appreciate this can be a pretty dry subject, as we're just going to be going through a few of the settings, but they do offer plenty of functionality, again, which you might not already be aware of. So I'm just going to show you where they are, what they're called. After the session, we'll also post up the actual names of them all because they are quite long. But to access the settings, it's in the admin tool. So if we just wait for that to load up, under your application, so because we're looking at Service Manager, so we're going to click on Service Manager and Settings. These are the settings that are specific to that app. In the system part, that will be the settings that are specific to the platform. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through a few of these and explain what they do, and you can go into your instance and you can go and turn these on and have a play around with them if you wish as well. Now, I'll be using the quick filter option up the top here. This will allow me to quickly find the setting because I know what most of them are called. But if you wanted to just have a look at the changed settings, the ones that are different from the defaults out of the box, you can just click this Show Modified Settings, and that, you can see, just gives you a list of all the ones that have been changed. On my demo instance, I've got quite a few. But if you ever do need to set it back to the default, you just click this orange button and it reverts it back. But I'm going to take that off. The first one we're going to be looking at is an experimental setting. So I'm just going to type in experimental here. Now what we mean by experimental settings are areas of Hornbill that we are trialling. They are not fully developed, but we wanted to get them out to get customer feedback. So when you use them, do just be careful. There may be still the odd bug, but do let us know if you do find that. If there is ever any problems with them, you can simply come back in and turn them off. But once we've tested it and once we are happy with it, we will turn it into its own actual system setting. But we just label it experimental whilst we've got those features which we want to get out as soon as possible, but they're not quite at the kind of fully tested state just yet. So we've got a couple here. The first one is called Advanced Request Task Completer. Now what this allows you to do is, if you're using human tasks and activities in your system, you can allow other users who are also members of a supported team that the assignee of the task is also a member of to come in and complete the activity. So this could be particularly useful if that particular user is away and you need someone else to go in and complete the activity on their behalf. Now when you do complete that activity, it will actually audit of the person who completed it rather than the person who it was originally assigned to. But it means you do not need to go and reassign all of your tasks. So do have a look at that one. I know that's commonly used by quite a few of our users at the moment. The multiple requests action, this experimental setting down here, this allows you to resolve or close multiple requests at once. So if I just pop back to the user app here, I'm just going to go to our request list and show you how this one works. If I sort this by service, so I'm going to look at our desktop support one. What they need to be are of the same service. You cannot perform this action on requests that are of different services. But if you are selecting multiple requests off the same service, so I've selected two here, both for the desktop support, what you can actually see is you've got a few options at the top which appear. So you've got the actions and assign request. So if I click on actions, this allows me to resolve both of these particular requests here. So if I put in just put test, click finish. You can see it gives you a little timeline because it does take a bit of time to go through all of these. But two of two have now been resolved, so those two that I selected will both be now in a resolved state. If I pick another two, let's just go back down to the desktop support service, find another two open ones. You can also see we've got something similar, but for assigned request here. So if you want to reassign multiple requests to a particular team or even to a particular analyst, you can do that all at once without having to go into each one individually. And those options are not available unless you turn on that particular setting. So again, I don't think there's too many issues with that at the moment, so do feel free to go in there and give that one a try. Okay, the next one we're going to be looking at is under the progressive capture label. And what you'll find here is we've got a few which begin with app.itsm.progressivecapture.new and then a particular type. So we've got one for new change, new incident, new known error. And again, if you've seen our business process and progressive capture webinar, you will hopefully be familiar with these. Actually, that may be, and again, in the services webinar as well. But what this does is it focuses on what is the default progressive capture for the different request types when you're raising a request in the user app. So that is particular to the user app. So what I'm talking about there is if I click on this drop down, which progressive captures sit behind each of these buttons. From there you can go and switch capture, which is a whole subject in its own right. But if you are looking to change the default progressive capture that sits behind each of these, so I click on new incident and the questions that get asked, that is where that's configured in the system settings under each of these. So you would click into this and you would just simply type in the name of the new progressive capture for the default. The next one that I'm going to be looking at, if I type in the word resolve, is this one here, allow resolve close without analyst. Fairly straightforward, this one. What this allows you to do if turned on is it will allow you to resolve a request even if an analyst has not been assigned. Again, you might want that as part of your process. You might require every request to have an analyst, but this is the system setting where you can turn that on or off. Let's just slightly change this filter to resolution. And the setting we're going to be looking at here is the stop resolution timer on resolve. So if you're using SLAs and if you're using targets, this particular system setting will automatically stop an SLA target, typically your resolution target, when the request has been resolved. Again, if you've been through that, you will have been previously told that you will need to put in kind of a stop timer node in your business process at the point you want it to be resolved, but you can have that happen automatically as well. Again, some of our customers need that, some don't, some do it purely through business process, but this setting allows you to make the choice if you need to. Now defaults, I'm going to just type in default here. I'm just going to scroll down to these ones here, so you can see the ones which we've kind of changed already. app.requests.default, BPM process dot, and then the type of a particular request. If you don't want to use a service, now it's not something that we recommend. Services are what drives the whole of Service Manager, that's why it's called Service Manager. But you don't have to use a service. You can raise requests without any business process whatsoever. But if you do want to do that and you want a default to be raised, so you're not raising it against a service, but you're just having a default for one particular type of request, so default change process, then this is where you would set it. So again, just like you did on the progressive capture, come into this part, change the name. Actually, you've got a drop down here to select the default business process for those requests that don't have a service, and that will be what is set against those particular requests. So again, the option is available in the system settings for that one. Now I'm going to look at notifications next, and to do this I'm actually going to remove anything from the filter and just focus on a couple of the pages, because I know that currently these settings are on page 5 and 6. So I'm going to click on 5, just scroll down to the bottom here. Now notifications in Service Manager, there's quite a lot of them, there's quite a lot of flexibility and functionality you have around them. I'm going to focus on a few of these here. In most scenarios, I'm not going to tell you all, but in most scenarios, notifications in Service Manager can be either focused through an email that goes out, which you can specify. You typically specify a template, a Hornbill notification, and by that I mean the little bell icon at the top, being able to notify someone, or both, a combination of both, so you can use an email or a Hornbill notification. If you are looking to use an email notification off the back of a Hornbill this is a non-business process notification, so something that automatically happens in all of Service Manager, you do need to specify the mailbox here. So this is guest.app.requests.notification.email mailbox. So some customers may have multiple mailboxes, so you need to specify the one that you want these emails to be coming from. And as you can see, you've got different types of, well, these are the actual templates that are being used, but if I just focus on, actually it's probably easier to show you on the next page, up at the top here, the different types of notification and if you want them turned on or off. So for example, if you get assigned a request as an owner, what you can actually do is specify an email to go out to that owner to tell them they've been assigned a request, a Hornbill notification to go out to tell them they've been assigned that request, both, so they'll get both of these, or none. So you don't actually want anyone to be notified that they've been assigned a request. And this is a default setting, so this applies to every single request within Service Manager. The difference here, you've got another one which is assignment team. And what this refers to is if a request has not been assigned to anyone, so if it's been assigned to an entire team rather than an individual, you've got those same options available. Let me give you an example here. You've got a new incident that comes in and it's assigned to, immediately assigned to your second line support team. You might not want to email every single member of that team. If you've got 30 people in there, you might not want an email to go out to all of them because it could be a bit overkill. You might decide to have a Hornbill only notification to all of them to let them know that a new request has come in. However, once that request has been assigned to an individual, you might want them to not only have a Hornbill notification, another one to tell them it's been assigned, but also an email. So we might select both for that one to let them know, so they know they've had that request been assigned to them. And you've got the ability to do that kind of individual and team-based notification for various different functions within Hornbill, such as cancelling a request. If there's been an update to the request via an email, can do a notification to let people know. In regards to adding members, in regards to requests to updates that have come from the portal. So if a customer has updated a request via the service or customer portals, you would probably likely want to notify your team or your members. So there's the team notifications and there's the individual notifications if it's been assigned to an individual. And again, we've got a few other bits and pieces here as well which do the same functionality. Back on page 5, if you are using emails, these are kind of linked to those the settings on the previous page, but these are the templates that go out. So you set your email templates. Let me just duplicate this tab. I'm just going to go back to Home, System, Email, and Templates, and you can see we've got a number of out-of-the-box ones, but you can create your own ones. Once you've created those templates, and you know you've got a template you want to send to kind of your analysts or the entire team, this is where you specify the relevant template to be sent based on the setting you've just set. So for example, the analyst assignment, we use the analyst assignment notification template to send that notification to them. So that's kind of notifications within Service Manager. There's a lot there. Do have a little look through all the different options, and it's something that you probably will want to configure at some point. Just going back to a few more of the quick ones. We've got one here which is show the resolve by date. Very simple again. If you're on the customer portal or the service portal, let's just navigate there. If I'm looking at a particular request and I want to open that up, if that request has actually got a service level agreement, you might want to show when the target is, here, the resolve by date. So this is what this system setting will allow you to do, whether or not you want to show that or not. That request I just looked at obviously does not have a service level target against it. Another one we've got here, if I type in additional, what this is referring to, again, you might be familiar with the concept of catalogue items on the portal. We, at the moment, by default, show the incident catalogue items and the service request catalogue items. We also now have change catalogue items that you can set up, but by default that will be turned off, so customers cannot raise changes, so to speak, directly through the portal. However, if you do want them to do that, you would need to this setting here, which is guest.servicemanager.portal.additionalrequesttypes.change, and turn it on, and any change specific catalogue items that you have created will be visible to your customers on the portal to select and request. Now, what we've got here, the next thing I'm going to show you is what we call the default visibility settings. What this refers to are the different actions. We've already covered actions in a bit of detail today. Let's just open up another one, another request. So these are your actions along the top. You can see each action, when you perform something, is actually on the timeline request. So this was an assign action. And what we're referring to by the default visibility is whether or not that particular entry on the timeline has got default visibility of customer facing or team only facing. So for example, if I click on assign here, you can see the default for assign is customer, which means that if I make a post here, so if I reassign this to Graham, click assign, that will be a customer facing update. And by the customer facing, what I mean is on your portal, if they were looking at that particular ticket, they would see that on the timeline. You might want one particular type of action, let's say, for example, the escalation. So if you're changing the priority, you might not want that by default available to be seen on the portal. So we might want this to be set to team by default. So if I change the priority here, I'm just going to put the word test in. You can see then that default is actually set to team, so the customer would not see that on the service portal. And if you want to change those defaults for the different types of action, this is where you would go to do it. So for that example I just gave, I would look for the escalate action. You can see the default at the moment is customer, so I would change that to team. So the next time that I actually logged in to the user app and went to escalate a request, it would now be showing the team by the default. And that's available for all of those action types. Next one I'm going to look at is catalogue. So you've got here the ability to say, is a catalogue item required? This catalogue item required only is relevant when you're raising a request via progressive capture. Let me show you an example of this. At the moment, this setting, if I just go back to the admin tool, is turned off. If I just was to work my way through this, test just to get to the services screen. What we mean here is, at the moment, if I was to click homeworking, you can see I've got a catalogue item. You can force your analysts to have to select a catalogue item before continuing. Because this is turned off at the moment, I can click next here, just based on the service. If you don't want that to happen, if you want them to have to select a catalogue item, first thing to bear in mind is obviously you will need a catalogue item for every service you have, but then you just come into here and turn this on. And that will force me next time, if I now refresh this, raise another request here. If I was to select homeworking alone now, you can see it prevents me from going forwards, and it does that. And this can be very useful because it means there's less permutations to your progressive captures and switching captures. So it's something that I probably would recommend turning on. But again, it is optional. There's a lot of customers who still want to raise requests directly against the service, and obviously that would not work for them. So do keep that in mind when you're building your service catalogue. A couple more. I'm going to type in closure here. You've got a closure category default required, and what this simply means is when you come to resolve a request, I'm just going back in the user app. If I was to click on resolve here, and I went to type in, if that is turned on and I click resolve and I haven't filled in this closure category option, it will prevent me from resolving it. So the closure categories, if you've not seen them before, are a way of categorising how the request was resolved. These can all be set up in your own kind of hierarchical tree structure in the admin tool. You would typically select on something, so replaced hardware. As long as that's got a value in there, it will let you click resolve. And that kind of prevention is turned on using this system setting, which is called servicemanager.request.closurecategory.default.required. And the final one I'm going to show you today, I know there's quite a few of them, and this is by no means all of them, but another one which is commonly used is something we call deny resolution with open activities. Very similar to what I've just shown you. What this will do is if you've got any activity that's still open and still assigned to a particular user or team, it will not allow you to resolve it until all of the activities that are currently against that have been completed. So to do that, you simply come and click on this particular system setting. And again, even if I try to resolve that now with that turned on, let's just try that one. Resolved. You can see it will give me an error message to say, please complete the activities. So that's another way of preventing people resolving a request a bit too early if you want them to follow your business process. Okay, so thank you very much for joining today's webinar. I hope there is a few bits and pieces there which you weren't aware of and you might decide to use on your particular instance. As I said at the very start of the session, please head to our wiki or head to the forums if you do have any questions, and we've got a whole team of people who would be willing to help you out with any type of thing that you need assistance with configuring. Thank you for joining again, and I hope to see you all again at Top Gens in the webinar soon. Thank you and goodbye.